Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're looking into something pretty interesting, a potential shift maybe. It's about whether some folks who voted for Donald Trump in his second term are, well, feeling some buyer's remorse now.
That's right. We've got some info from a recent Wall Street Journal poll. It was discussed in a YouTube video transcript by The Ring of Fire. But what's really, insightful are the direct statements from some of these voters. We're trying to get beyond just the numbers.
Exactly. The mission here isn't just like reporting poll results. It's more about understanding the why behind any shifts in feeling straight from them. Think of this as a quick way for you to get up to speed on this possibly significant development. Okay, so let's start with the poll itself. What's it telling us?
Well, the Wall Street Journal poll of Trump voters, it brings up some really noteworthy points. A significant chunk, 53%, said they wanted big changes in how the government operates. Now, that's over half of the people who, voted him in for the second term.
Yeah, that is striking, isn't it? You'd almost expect, well, you'd think after voting someone in, there'd be more satisfaction with the direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this suggests maybe not. And it gets even more specific when you look at certain policy ideas. A big majority, 60%, apparently opposed the plan to replace long-term civil servants, the career government folks, with people loyal specifically to the Mizzie movement.
Which is fascinating, right? Because even among his supporters, there seems to be this concern about politicizing the civil service too much. It brings up that whole question about expertise and stability versus just political loyalty everywhere.
Absolutely. It kind of suggests there's a line, maybe a limit to how much disruption some voters actually want, even if they supported the overall message. And it wasn't just that. 60% of these same Trump voters also oppose getting rid of the Department of Education.
Right. And again, this sort of highlights a potential disconnect, between maybe some of the more radical ideas being floated and what a good portion of his actual base wants. They might have backed him for various reasons, but dismantling a whole federal department like education seems like that's a bridge too far for a lot of them.
And maybe the most telling thing, thinking about checks and balances. Only a small minority, just 18%, support giving the president unlimited power to spend money, overriding Congress.
That number is surprisingly low. It really suggests that even among strong supporters, there's still a basic understanding, maybe even an appreciation for, how our government's supposed to work. That checks and balances idea that one person shouldn't just have all the power, especially over the purse strings. So yeah, on these specific proposals, it really looks like a clear majority of the Trump voters they polled are showing some unease pretty early in the second term.
Right. The poll gives us that broad picture, that sense of potential dissatisfaction. But to really get what's driving it, you need to hear from people directly. And that's where these individual testimonials from the transcript come in. The first one's from a voter named Stacey White.
Yeah, Stacey's quote about border security is quite revealing. She said, when we said safer borders, I thought he was thinking, let's stop the drugs from coming into the country. Yeah. I didn't know he was going to start raiding places. Now I'm like, dang, why didn't I just pick Kamala?
Okay, wow. There's a lot of packed into that, isn't there? First, her initial take on safer borders sounds like it was focused on drugs, which is, a pretty standard part of that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
The fact she was surprised by immigration raids implies maybe a gap between the campaign talk and the reality she saw happening.
That's a key point, yeah. Her expectation seems to have been more along the lines of traditional border control strengthening, the move to widespread raids. That seems to have caught her off guard, and clearly it sparked some serious regret. The bluntness of, dang, why didn't I just pick Kamala? It really hits home how disillusioned she feels, how she's second-guessing her vote because of these actions.
It really does. It's not just vague disappointment. It's right there, questioning the choice based on the outcome.
Yep.
Then there's another voter, Emily Anderson. Her statement, even stronger.
Right. Emily Anderson called voting for Trump the biggest mistake of my life. Her main issue, according to the transcript, was about using Guantanamo Bay for immigration crackdowns.
And the words she uses, they're incredibly powerful. She feels appalled, stupid, guilty, regretful, and embarrassed. That's a really intense mix of negative feelings tied directly to her vote.
Yeah, and what's particularly interesting about Emily's statement is that level of self-reflection. She's not just angry or let down, she's admitting feeling stupid and guilty. It suggests, a pretty significant amount of self-awareness, taking some accountability for her decision. Like the video creator pointed out, that kind of internal processing might be a stronger sign of someone actually changing their political views later, maybe more so than just being surprised or angry.
That's an interesting distinction to make. Surprise could just mean someone didn't quite get the memo or maybe interpreted promises differently, right?
Sure.
But this kind of deep regret, especially with those really strong emotions, it seems to point towards a more fundamental rethinking of like values and priorities. So if we connect this back to the bigger picture, could this kind of feeling, if it spreads, actually make a difference in upcoming elections?
Oh, absolutely. The video creator specifically mentions the 2026 midterms and the 2028 presidential race, suggesting this reported buyer's remorse could definitely be a factor in, whether we see big political shifts. It really asks that basic question. How solid is political loyalty when voters feel their expectations weren't met, or worse, that their own values were compromised by what the person they voted for actually did?
Okay, so let's kind of wrap up what we've looked at in this deep dive. We've seen poll numbers suggesting a decent chunk of Trump voters aren't happy with specific policy directions in his second term.
Right.
And we've heard directly from a couple of voters who aren't just disappointed, they're actively saying they regret their vote, pointing to things like border security methods and immigration policies.
And we should, of course, remember this is just a few data points, one poll, a couple of individual stories highlighted in one video. But they do give us a peek into maybe an evolving situation within the electorate. That difference between voters just being surprised versus those showing real regret and self-awareness, that seems pretty important when thinking about possible longer-term political shifts.
Absolutely. So you've now got a distilled sense of this emerging story and the perspectives of some of these voters firsthand. So here's something to chew on. Thinking about these reports of buyer's remorse, what factors do you think are most crucial when a voter judges a leader or a party after the election is over? And how much does the clarity or maybe the fuzziness of campaign promises play into whether voters end up feeling okay with their choice? This deep dive just offers a glimpse, really, into a complex and ongoing thing, and we'd encourage you to keep observing and thinking critically about it all. Thanks for joining us.